while we actually get to go to court and try a case. Matt and I got to do that last week, and the results were very good. We came back with a verdict of $28 million. Matt, what was this case about?
So this was a head-on collision case. The at-fault driver had crossed over a center line on a two-lane road and collided head-on into our client's father's vehicle. And so one thing that we did to help the jury understand the mechanics of the collision was create an animation, which we do in a lot of our bigger cases. And so we're going to walk you through what we did with the help of DK Global, of course. So here in most of our animations, we start with an overhead view to sort of orient the jury to where the collision happened. And then here is the reconstruction portion, which our accident reconstructionist helped create. So here, this is the at-fault driver crossing over the center line, causing the collision. We do several different vantage points to really depict what happened. Now, interestingly, so there was no data on these vehicles, so our accident reconstructionist used the vehicle's final resting places to work backwards and sort of map out how the collision happened, which was kind of like CSI-like. And then the second portion of the animation was the mechanism of fatality, which we worked with the medical examiner to create. So here is Mark driving. An eyewitness had testified that she had heard him honking the horn, so that's how we were able to do that. And so here's really the medical part. We had the medical examiner talk about the deformity to the chest wall and explain what a hemopneumothorax was, which I had to practice saying so I didn't mess it up in front of the jury.
I didn't have to say that. I still can't.
And then the medical examiner had actually said that there were seconds to minutes from the time of the collision through the time of death, which an eyewitness also corroborated. And so we were able to use that portion from the certified medical record, or I guess really death certificate, in the animation, which would have gone to post-collision pain and suffering. And there's our animation. That's what happened.
So a word about going on to damages?
Yeah, I guess, well, before we do that, I guess it's worth noting that, this was an admitted negligence case, meaning that the defendant had admitted that they messed up, they made a mistake. And so normally we do all these animations and have an accident reconstruction expert testify to fight liability. But here they admitted it, and so we really just wanted the jury to understand what happened. But the focus was really on damages, which Jeb will talk about.
Yeah, well, I'll start us. So a man lost his life in this collision. So Georgia law describes how the jury should come up with their damages figure, what number they should attach to that. And Georgia law says that you measure the full value of the decedent's life from the decedent's perspective, had they lived. Like, how much will you have to pay the decedent to give up all their remaining days on this planet? That's the full measure of damages. And it has two parts, an intangible part and then a tangible or economic part. And my job today is to talk about the intangible part, then Matt will cover the economic. The intangible part refers to those parts of life that really make us want to get up in the morning. It's the parts of life that we care about the most. If you ask most people about this, as we did in jury selection or voir dire, they'll tell you family and faith and friends, often in that order. Sometimes the order changes. Sometimes they say things like my dog. Somebody said my car in this jury pool. But in general, it's family, friends, and faith that come out among the top three most of the time. So we presented evidence about those things to show what this man, Mark Cohen, valued the most in life. And so we go through a lot of evidence in the form of testimony, and that's probably most important in terms of witnesses. Matt had done great witness work in this case, so we had the hall outside the courtroom just full of witnesses waiting to testify. I think we had about 15 people come in and talk about who Mark was at work, who Mark was at church, his involvement in Boy Scouts, his time with his family, fishing and playing and hiking with his friends. So we present a bunch of evidence and video, and just quickly, here's some of that. We've chosen 3 photos to share here. This is Mark on the far right in his Easter plaid shirt with his family. This is Mark and his daughter Emily having climbed on this large rock here in a stream in North Georgia. And then we have Mark by that same stream actually with his dog. He loved dogs, spent a lot of time with him. So the evidence showed that Mark was a special man. A lot of people just loved him. He was one of those guys who took care of the people around him in a way that probably we all should, but few of us actually do. One of the stories I like the best is someone left town on vacation for 2 weeks, one of Mark's friends. This is one of your witnesses. And so the guy's like coming back from his vacation after 2 weeks. He's like, dang, I got to do all this catching up. I'm going to have to cut my grass because it's summertime in Georgia. It will have grown really tall. It's going to be a pain. He got there, and his lawn was perfect. The grass was cut. The beds were made. The shrubberies were trimmed. And it was because Mark had done it for him. And Mark didn't even tell him. The guy had to find out like 2-3 days later from a mutual friend that it was Mark who cut his grass. This kind of man he was. And all that is part of the intangible value of life. But there's also an economic component to it. What do you say, Mr. Kahn?
Sure. So yeah, while this case was overwhelmingly, I'd say, about the intangible parts of Mark Cohen's life, we did want to at least talk about the economic parts, because that is a part of damages that we're entitled to talk about, and the heirs are entitled to recover. And so to do that, we hired an economist, actually a professor of accounting at Georgia State University, to look at Mark's tax returns, historical tax returns, and then create a set of calculations that would enable the jury to basically figure out how much money he would have made in his lifetime. And to do that, he walked the jury through several calculations. One just outlined how much money he would have earned, another to outline how many benefits, how much he would have earned in benefits, and then finally household services, which we're not paid for, obviously, but make up a large part of what we do. And so that would look at things like doing the dishes or mowing the lawn and just basically taking care of your house. And the jury would then decide how many hours a day he would have done that, and then pick out a number based on that. And so I'll let Jeb talk about the actual verdict, but the verdict then took into account both the intangible and the tangible elements of damages.
Yeah. So after we present all the evidence, the defense had a chance to present evidence. They chose to present none. They do that because that means they get to argue last. So then we give closing argument and then theirs. In our closing argument, we talked about the money and the full value of life and all those things. Asked the jury to return a verdict for pre-impact fright, shock, and terror, which that's those moments where Mark is driving and he sees that red SUV coming to him. He knows he can't avoid it. And he's bleeping the horn, trying to get them to turn, and they won't turn. He's maybe edging over the side of his lane, but he knows he's about to die or get hurt badly. That fright, shock, and terror is kind of compensable. We had also planned to ask the jury for pain and suffering, but in the end did not do that because the only testimony at trial was from an eyewitness who Matt presented, who was great, but said that by the time she reached Mark, he was unconscious. So we did not ask the jury for any money for post-collision pain and suffering for that reason. So here is the verdict form. After we argue, the defense argues, the judge gives the law, the jury goes and gives a verdict, and this is what they did. It is a $28 million verdict. So it's a good case. We represented a truly great family. trying to do good work for good people, and we were able to do that here. Family was happy, and we got a tri-case. So. A good week.